I am really humbled to have been asked to come back and deliver the speech that I delivered 2 years ago. Congratulations and thank you to you and all Rotarians for taking on the project to stamp out polio. I had polio. I am a polio survivor. Those words are the most I have said. I never talk about having polio until today, nor did my parents talk or share very much. Let me introduce you to those who saved my life. Elizabeth Kenny, Sister Kenny, an unaccredited nurse who promoted a controversial approach to the treatment of polio. Her findings ran counter to the conventional medical wisdom. They demonstrated the need to exercise the muscles affected by polio instead of immobilizing them. Her principles of muscle rehabilitation became the foundation of physical therapy or physiotherapy. My dad worked for CPR. My mom, dad, younger sister Carol, and I lived on Wattsville, across from the Lang Farm, which is now T.M. Roberts School. My maternal grandparents, affectionately known as Big Mummy and Big Daddy, lived next door. Auntie Louise, my dad's sister, who was a nurse in training here at St. Eugene Hospital. Mrs. Murgatroyd, who in my mind was a nurse. Her daughter had had polio the year before me. At the time, there were 4 doctors in Cranbrook. Dr. Sullivan was the family doctor. Doctors Green, Mugan, and Brockington would all play a role in the patient's care. And oh yes, they did make house calls. In the spring of 1949, we all had smallpox vaccinations, and I had quite a severe reaction with high fever, and just over that, I got a case of the red measles. So my resistance was run down. I'd been outside, probably playing, came in the house, fell on the floor, and could not get up. This was the beginning of a long, hard summer and a journey that would leave me remembering very little. No 2 cases of polio are the same, since the damage that the polio virus can cause along the long stretch of the spinal cord is quite random. I was diagnosed with bulbar polio, which may or may not be preceded by minor illness, is characterized by the involvement of the central nervous system, stiff neck and paralysis. The muscles of swallowing and breathing are affected. The doctors told my parents that if I survived, I would, in all probability, be paralyzed. My mom and dad never bought into that. And this is what I remember. The pain. Excruciating pain, crying with pain, screaming with pain. Every little touch hurt. Before going to the hospital, my long braids had to be cut off while I laid in bed and was turned side to side. It took 4 of them to do that, and I remember that. My trip to the hospital was in a taxi. Everything at the Larson house was now under quarantine, and I was isolated. I don't know how long my hospital stay was. I do remember being taken to a huge big bathtub, at least that's what it was to me, lowered very carefully on some round tubes into hot water. Opening my eyes one very dark evening to see a nurse by the name of Rose who was sitting there. And she did that every night I was in the hospital. My mom and dad would soon learn that the 2 iron lungs that were in BC were in use and not available to them. They were devastated. Now, part of the unknown puzzle is how Mrs. Murgatroyd and mom and dad came together. Regardless, it was she who introduced them to the Sister Kinney treatment. Take a sheet, cut it so it wraps around the legs, thighs, feet, hands, and arms. Put in hot water, wring it out, apply to the body parts, and then massage the muscles. I came home from the hospital. Our kitchen now became medical central. Pots on the stove, keeping the water as hot as I could stand it. Transferred to an old wringer washing machine. Sheet pieces soaked in the hot water, put through the wringer and applied to my body. While Dad was massaging one area, Mom or Mrs. Murgatroyd would apply the sheet to the other part of the body. It was important to keep that sheet on the body hot at all times. The treatment went on 24/7 for weeks in the heat of the summer months. On her days off, Auntie Louise would come by and help. The intensity of care, unbelievable. As a parent, I can't imagine looking at this very sick, paralyzed child day after day. Mom and Dad were determined and persevered to save my life, and I was determined and persevered to live. My cot in the kitchen was strategically placed under a window so I could look up at the blue sky, watch the apple tree bear fruit, and feel the warmth of the sunshine. Above me hung a beautiful pink fuchsia plant. Someone was at my side around the clock. Carol was in charge and in care of being taken care of by Big Mummy, who cooked all the meals, did all the laundry, etc. for the family. I don't know how my parents survived. Dad was off work for 3 months. There certainly were no GoFundMe pages in those days. My recollection of the first part of recovery was being in a big bed propped up by pillows and having Auntie Louise telling me stories or singing to me. How I loved to hear her sing. My Uncle Bill, who always made me laugh and teaching me funny bad songs. Pushing a doll buggy through the house. Lots of falls, but I was on my feet and by now talking. Dad promised that when I was well enough, they would buy me a 2-wheeler bike. I thought that was the greatest gift in the whole wide world. The bike was navy blue and silver, and I rode that bike back and forth in front of the Lang property. I was determined to master the art of riding a bike and strengthening those muscles. It was now mid-September, and I wanted to go back to school. Mom and Dad never held me back. As I got to junior high, I dreaded phys ed. I was intimidated by those who could run and deathly afraid to do a somersault because of the pain I had experienced in my neck. But I could hardly wait to join the bugle band. That was, in my parents' eyes, a big test. Could I endure the walking and the marching? I did and loved every minute of it. The next real test would be having children. Dad did share with me that this was one of his greatest concerns. Well, we have two sons, two great sons, that both my dad and their dad would be extremely proud of. Bill Bennett, David Kaiser. Now you know why being nominated to carry the Olympic torch, participate in the Rick Hansen relay, meant so very much. I was doing something I was never supposed to do, walk. I know that I have been blessed beyond measure. Rotarians, continue on with your campaign to eradicate polio. Get rid of this disease and stop the suffering. I'm Karen Penner. I had polio, and I am a polio survivor.